Welcome. My name is Ipatia Apostolides, and I am the director of the Hellenic Writers Group of Washington, D.C. Today, I am excited and honored to have Xanthi Hondrou-Hill join us. I met her online through Facebook, where she invited us to take part in a poetry event. Xanthi has also taken part in several of our Writers Group meetings and has shared her beautiful poems with us. Today, she will be speaking to us about her life and poetry. I will read a little of her biography, then share her poem, Mediterranean Waves. Xanthi Hondrou-Hill is an award-winning Greek poet born in Germany. Her poems have been published in international prestigious media and anthologies worldwide. She has won many awards recently in China and Ecuador and is cultural ambassador for Namaste magazine in India. She's also the editor of poetry at www.feretra.info in Greece. Selections of her poetry have been translated into Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Greek, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Slavic, Hindi, and Bengali. She also has translated poetry. Besides writing poems, Xanthi is a lifelong learner, educator, journalist, and public relations expert. After studying French and English at the Open University, she received a master's in German literature and linguistics at the University of Stuttgart. As an educator, she taught Greek, German, and English at language schools and Greek language at the University of Stuttgart. In Stuttgart, Xanthi also studied postgraduate journalism at the University of Hohenheim and public relations management at HWGW. As a public relations advisor for the Greek General Consulate of Greece, Dr. Mercurios Karafiotias, in Stuttgart, Xanthi designed and organized a series of events that improved the fame of Greece in Germany. I would like to take a moment and share one of her poems with you, The Mediterranean Waves, that was published in the Mediterranean Poetry Journal. 3 blue poets fill our life, one singing the blue from the sky, the other the waves of the sea, and the third whispers the wisdom of the wind. No matter to which shores the poem takes us, with which clouds we want to travel, with the wave of a blue scarf, or the white sail of a boat, the wing of a plane, there's always the wisdom of the wind to carry us. To reach the shores of dreams with flowers, pebbles, and seashells as treasures. The nights where we talked at blue tables with friends, or on the phone miles away, listening to the tide at full moon. The fun we shared traveling in a rental car without lights, on an island looking to avoid a monastery, and ending up spending the day there in the arms of a saint, bringing with us healing oils and sacred water. The paintings we discovered in the small museum, in our faces and on the street corners looking down to the sea, feeding a foreign-hungry artist at the little coffee shop by the seaside. We didn't exchange letters and alphabets like our ancestors, didn't care if the numbers were Arabic or Greek, didn't even try to find common ground, because 3 blue poets, a painter, and a musician filled our life with the waves of the Mediterranean. This beautiful poem about the Mediterranean waves begins with 3 blue poets. The poem tells us a story, and we journey with the narrator, traveling in a rental car at night, visiting the island's monastery, and ending in the arms of a saint where healing oils and sacred water expand the poem to a spiritual plane. We visit the shores of dreams, and we enter a magical world filled with the senses, flowers, and seashells, while listening to the tide. This journey takes us to the coffee shop with images of the shore, a scarf, and a sailboat in the background. But even with these changing landscapes, the poem consistently returns to the wisdom of the wind, which does not vary. Yet toward the end of the poem, we recapitulate with the theme of 3 blue poets, plus we also have the images of a painter and a musician filling the narrator's life. In this poem, the narrator uses metaphors to compare the poets to the sky, the sea, and the wind. An ebb and flow, a natural rhythm, interweaves these concrete images with symbols like the wisdom of the wind. One may also believe that the wind symbolizes the spirit, because later in the poem, the narrator visits a monastery and a saint. This interplay between metaphors, symbolism, and concrete images is woven throughout the poem. Ambiguity in a poem allows the reader's imagination to fill in the gaps. Each reader receives a unique impression of the poem and gains different interpretations, and therefore a unique perspective. This was my perspective. You can find Xanthi's poem in the online journal Mediterranean Poetry. Thank you, Xanthi, for sharing this lovely poem with us. Moving forward, I have prepared some questions for Xanthi in hopes that we can have an in-depth conversation about her life and poetry. Although I mentioned briefly about your career, please tell us more about yourself, Xanthi. You are a Greek poet studying in Germany. How did you end up in Germany? And how was it you studied English in college?
I was born in Germany in 1964, but I didn't stay there. My grandmother came 4 months later and picked me up, taking me to Greece, where I grew up with her until I was 5. I barely knew my parents till then, because they were coming for very short visits and going back to Germany, because this was the life of the immigrant families at that time. The children were brought home like with a suitcase, and the parents needed to work. So nothing new there. Then my mother came to stay with us when I was 5, because they started building the house where I'm talking to you right now from. And my father continued working in Germany until he got sick. So we came back to Germany and stayed there until I was like 34. And I started to go there to school, and that meant to both schools, Greek and German school. So it was mornings in the German school, because that was mandatory, and in the afternoons on a daily basis at the Greek school to get the Greek education. Unfortunately, the Greek education stopped at some point after the primary school, because the junior high school was private. So we couldn't afford that because we were poor. So I had to continue on the German system. So I visited the junior high, which was after the 4th grade in Germany. The school system changes, and you have like 3 different levels of school system. So the gymnasium leads to the university, and I was on the lowest level, which was called Hauptschule. But there, my favorite subject was English. So I started really, really happily learning English, because I had a system. I learned German just by sitting in a class in the back row and not understanding anything. And looking stupid most of the time, let's face it, yeah, we don't understand a word. So this was my chance to actually understand the language. And I had so much fun with it, because nobody else could understand how to learn. But since I had mastered German without any help, this was like a cakewalk. So I was very happy there. So finishing with the Hauptschule, I had really, really good grades, because I had only one school system to take care of and not focus on 2 different languages at the same time. And my parents wanted me actually to go and work to the Mercedes factory, which was very close by. And my father was working there. And because I was a girl, so we're talking about the last century now, my education was not important. They had 4 boys, I had 4 brothers, and it was much more important for them to get a good education than it was for a girl who would get married and have kids. So, but my teachers vetoed that decision, and it was the first time a school would actually step into the family's decision and take it away from them. And they informed also the social services that this girl is gonna go to a higher school, so you could jump to a different school. And but the parents had to be okay with that. So mine weren't, and they were vetoed. So one morning, all the teachers got together, or a bunch of teachers got together and just went to my mother, because my parents were not visiting PTA meetings either. It was not important. It was just not important enough. And they announced it to her that this child is going to a very prestigious school in the center of the town, not at the outskirts, and you have to deal with it. So I started going there, and after a few months, a few friends who I kept in touch with from the Greek school told me that the Lyceum, so basically the high school, the Greek high school, is going to start, and that they are taking students from the German educational system as well, because you need to understand that I lost 3 years of education, so zigzagging back and forth. So I went back to my German junior high school teachers, which got me into the good school, and I told them how the situation is and that I would really like to go to the Lyceum, because it would give me more opportunities. I would have the opportunity to actually study, which I always wanted. I wanted to study medicine, and I was really good in the junior high with all the technical stuff like chemistry and physics, and I understood it really well. They agreed, and they informed social services that I'm going to the higher education school, and they were all okay with it. And we kept in touch with some of them. So it was really good. But it was really difficult in the Greek school. During my junior high in the German system, because I was so depressed, the teachers had told me to start writing, because we're talking about writing today, to start writing a journal, on a daily basis. Because when you don't have the opportunity to talk to somebody, then you always have like a conversation with yourself. And because I didn't want anybody to read that, or even if they read that, not to fully understand what I say, because I was getting much better in English than any other student. So I could understand much more and I could express a lot more. I wrote it in English. So I kept that going like 2-3 years, and my English got better and better. And I think one of my teachers let me even do a lesson. I said, who would like to do a lesson in English? So I went up there and said, I will do it. Do you need any help? No, I don't. And I did it really well. And I had a really misbehaving teacher in the class. So I didn't know how to deal with that, but that's a different story. So that was really fun. And so then I went into the Greek system, and being there was really, really hard, because I didn't anticipate the workload which I had to do there, which was immense. And so I had to learn Greek, and really fast. So what I did was writing from my books just a page of Greek every day, so that I can get the structure down, I can get the grammar down, I can get the words right, I can get the positioning correct. So this is how I started to improve myself in Greek, and getting closer and closer to what where the other people were. So this is how I finished then with really good grades as well. The Greek system. So now we come to the time where it's time to go to the university. And of course, it doesn't go well. So nothing goes well. My father is sick. He is having trouble with his lungs, and he is hospitalized for a long, long time. And he doesn't get out in time for me to go to Greece and to do my exams for the university. So my mother takes me to the side and says, choose anything you want here in Stuttgart or very close by, where you can go an hour away, something like that. So I had to look what I'm interested in, and nothing of that was actually my first choice. So I looked at the University of Stuttgart, and they had like German literature and English, and you had the philological subjects. You had to take two languages together, because they thought it's not enough if you take just one. So I thought, English, yay, great idea. And I went and did, so the admission to the university is an examination. And I drove to Karlsruhe and I drove to Heidelberg to give my examinations. And I failed Karlsruhe because my maths wasn't good enough. But I knew that. I was good in maths, but not as good as the Germans. And then I was left with Heidelberg. And this is the irony of the whole thing. I failed English. in the oral because I blacked out. I was there and they asked me something about animals in the forest, and I had one word which I couldn't understand, which was hunter, and it made no sense. The whole text made no sense, and I froze. I failed English. So I went back and I thought, I'm not getting in. But it wasn't that way, but I didn't know that because I had no information from the university. So I spent the next year learning English and learning French at the Open University and learning stenography and learning accountancy, which I have a degree, by the way, in accountancy as well. Thinking that, okay, if I can't do anything else, plan C, become secretary. Wasn't my first choice either, but it would be acceptable. So after having done all that and having cleaning toilets in a supermarket for a year, which was a really good experience because you do not want to do that for the rest of your life. I decided to find out what happened with Heidelberg. Since I couldn't get anybody to answer me that, I went to the Minister of Education in Stuttgart, because every county in Germany is decentralized, and you have in every county you have a ministry. So I went there to the minister and asked him, I did this and that, and I had an audience. So he called the college and asked them what happened there, and they told him that oh yes, she can come next year and do her English, just English, and do an oral test, and then we're fine. So I went back the next year, did my English examination, and actually passed with flying colors, and came into Stuttgart University to study German and English. And as English was my favorite subject from a very, very young age, my father was very proud with me. So he made every movement to push me into languages, and it was an American sector, because in post-Nazi Germany we still had the sectors and we still had all the bases in all the different parts. And in Stuttgart is actually quite a big base, and very close by is Ramstein, which is in all the films and the James Bond films and stuff like that. This is one of the air bases which is very well known. So we had lots of American soldiers around in the city, and you could actually see them. So he was stopping in the middle of the street and said, "Ask him where he's coming from." What's his name? It was really weird for me, but I was always translating for my parents. So people were nice, and they were good game. And yeah, so this is how I got a really good accent in English. And it's interchangeable between British and American English, because what I hear is coming in and it's staying for the second, and then when I'm in a different environment I have a different accent. So I hope I answered that. It's a long answer. So
thank you, Xanthi. That was remarkable what you went through, and you were a high achiever, and it's obvious with you just moving forward like that. Bravo. I'm so glad that you pursued that path, because now you can share all your talent with the world. How did you become involved in writing poems, and at what age?
I got involved in the age of 13 to 14 when I started actually with a journal. And I kept that going for a long time. And that was a good outlet. I didn't do that to actually pursue a career in literature. I just did it to write my thoughts down and to sketch my path, or to organize next day, or to get over things. And it was very, very good, because there were times where I had literally nobody to talk to. So after I studied at the Greek school, we were very cramped on space in our building. And our class, which was the biggest class, because we were from schools which were coming from lower Greek schools, or from children who were not very good, who needed help. And a big part was coming from German schools who wanted to get back into the Greek system. So we were 64 children, huge class. And there was no space for us in the regular building. And we got moved into the Greek house of Stuttgart. And that was in the middle of the town, which was a great hall, basically, where events from different clubs were held and things like that, and lectures, and Greek cinema was played. So we were in this huge hall having Greek lessons, and there was a social worker there. His name was Yannis Fasoulidis, with whom I had a lot of conversations and discussions, and about problems and theoretical things and stuff like that. So at some point, he was so, I don't know, inspired, fed up. He gave me a book and said, "Read this, and we talk about it tomorrow." So of course it was poetry, and it was the book of Johannes Burton, who was a great Philhellene, and who was inspired by Greece, and everything he wrote was about Greece, and the travels and the landscapes and the colors and philoxenia and all that. And of course, I read that the same night, all of it. And so the next day I came back, and Yannis said, "Okay, you read that? That's great. Okay, now start writing yourself." I said, it doesn't go that way. It's not that easy. He said, "I bet it is." So it took me, like, I don't know, a month maybe, when I started writing the first poems. And of course they were German, because I was much more rooted in German than I was in Greek. He took those poems, of course, and he gave them straight to Johannes Burton, to which he was a very close friend, which I didn't know. So a few days later, he comes back and says, "You know what? Johannes Burton is inviting you to come to his workshop with poets." I am, yay! So I go back and tell it to my parents. And of course, what do they say? No. So there was a firm no. And but it was a firm no. But of course, whatever your parents say no in puberty, this is the greatest love of your life. So here we are, and I'm in love with poetry. And yeah, this is the first step. And from there, it was just a small step of writing in German and translating into Greek, which I did. And my Greek teacher was very supporting. I have to say that at some point during maths lessons, for instance, I couldn't understand what the teacher was saying, and I was asking the words. It wasn't about the functions or the lines or the parallels or algebra or geometry. It was about, what is propodes? Tine propodes? And he went, okay, we need to go a little bit back. So everybody else, hold your questions. And then he was painting the mountain and showing that the propolis are the bit of the mountain which starts the mountain. And to explain all that, he did other much more simple stories so that everybody can understand. And the thing was that I was the only student who had the courage to ask stupid questions. As it comes now to me, it was stupid questions for the rest of them, but there were also children very, very scared to ask any sort of questions because of the Greek educational system, because you were not allowed to ask many questions. The teacher would say something, and then you would go home and read it and not understand anything. And that was just not an option for me. I wanted to understand, and this way the whole class got to understand a little bit more, which was great.
And Johannes Burton, I'm going to have to look him up.
Burton.
And, he sounds fascinating.
It's Poeten, like poet, poeten. And he's also the founder of the House of the Writers in Stuttgart. I don't know if it still exists, but at that time it was creating stipendia for very talented writers so that they could come in for a whole year or 6 months, and then they would live in the house and get in touch with lots of different writers and poets, because there were lots of things happening in the house. And he would write his book, which would be printed then with costs of House of the Writers. And also I'd like to share that this is the almanac. So they started doing poetry collections. And this is one of them. And every year would come out one of these. And then they would pick people who could actually contribute. And yes, I was very lucky to be one of them.
Thank you, Xanthi. This is very fascinating. And so now we go to the next question. And you've already started to tell us a little bit about it, but let's find out more about your favorite Greek poets and poets outside of Greece.
Okay, so my favorite Greek poets are the classics. I love Elitis, I love Seferis, I love Kavafis, Karyotakis, the sad ones. But I also do like the contemporary Greek poets, which are quite good. So I want to share this book with you. This is Beyond the Language, which Misna Chanu has started. This is an anthology. And in there, I'm featuring actually 14 plus me Greek poets. And I'm going to tell you the names. It's Antonia Maria Tsitsi, Andonis Philippeos, who is the poet who writes fantastic about love. Just brilliant, really lyric poetry of the best, and he's winning a lot of awards about that. It's Christos Toumanidis, who is one of my longest friends here in Greece. When I first arrived here, he was the first person who spoke to my heart. Spiros Kyoses, who is writing poetry which is taking your socks off, just so it just grabs you with simple words, which is fantastic. Dimitris Kraniotis, one of my favorite poets, which I was following without him knowing me. And I met him lately, and he is fantastic. He's just, and he is winning lots of awards lately as well. And all of them are award winning. Miltiadis Dovas, I had the pleasure to translate one of his books, which is, he is using just simple words and putting them in a different way every time together, and it's just breathtaking and strong and deep and meaningful. Dimitris Papasteriou is a fellow from Ipatia, from the same county that I am, and he is lately really picking up the speed in poetry and really inspiring. Titos Patricios, he is the oldest Greek contemporary poet who is still alive, and who I have a poem in here as well. And then I go to the women. Fani Athanasiadou, she is a fantastic poetess, a disabled person with such a fantastic soul. You wouldn't, if you read her poems, you would never think that this woman is disabled. It's just fantastic. Kula Adaloglu, who is also brilliant and inspiring. Maria Lazzari, who is a doctor and is actually using a lot of I'd say vocabulary out of the medical world in the poetry, which is also unique and fantastic. And then we have Elsa Cornetti, who is who has also lived in Germany for a while, but lives now in Thessaloniki and has this duality with German and Greek. Pertha Kalemi is actually one of my favorite poetesses, who writes from a female point of view about love. And she has, if she doesn't have rhyme, she has always rhythm, and it's just magnificent poetry. And the last one I have here, but not least, there are many others out there, like I hope one who is who could connect, like Yorgos Saradzis, who is a very good radio producer in Thessaloniki and is himself a poet, and does this fantastic radio show. Maybe he can say afterwards a little bit about it, where he combines like beautiful music with poetry together, and he has this fantastic radio voice, which is so inspiring by itself. And then, okay, so these are the Greek ones. I'm putting the book to the side. These are the Greek ones. And then we have outside of Greece, I want to make amends with my German past. And I want to say Antje Steen. Antje Steen is a great German poetess who lives in Italy, and who does a fantastic project, the Rucksack Project, which is talking about tea and how tea is coming into our lives. And I'm a curator for her project as well, trying to do a little blog spot about it, which should be coming in at some point, and where you can all then also invite you to join with a poem which you write, and about tea, and a little video so that we can put that up on the website as well. From Italy, Lucilla Trapasso, a fantastic power of femininity poet who translated several of my poems into Italian. Mr. Chanu, I've already mentioned with the book, and I've cooperated in a few more anthologies which she done from India, who has this spirituality and finesse in her poems, which are really delicate but very deep at the same time. Johanna Devatayawu, who is a Swiss poetess living in India. So you see this duality in nationalities and jumping back and forth. It's coming back at us, and she writes fantastic spiritual poems with an effortless rhyming, which I really admire. I admire that. I can't do it. I can do it in English partly. I can't do it in Greek to save my life. And then I have a few more. I have David Leo Surleon, who does wonderful, mysterious poems and shows actually about poetry. And Elena Ananeyevna from Ukraine, who does international projects. Ashraf Abul Yazid Dalim, who does fantastic anthologies with Mediterranean waves. And the poem you have read was actually published for the first time there. And it got republished in the other one, which you mentioned, which I can't remember at the moment, too nervous. And he does at the moment the 1001 Arabic Nights, which is another amazing project with lots of people joining in there. And I have a few more. It's Dominic Williams, who is very inspiring with his Curry and Kuru, which is Wales for I think beer and poetry, or drinks and poetry, translated. And I do a lot of things in Write for Word. So writeforword.co.uk. Bob Whelan with his Rockport Poetry Sessions and his Rockport Poetry Festival. And last but not least, and I hope he's there, Richard Spisak, who bubbles me up. This poem is fantastic. He has to read it at some point. He does this fantastic things with rhyme and rhythm, which are so inspiring. So that's it. And of course, a few of your group, which are very inspiring, who took part in a thing which I did. And it was so great because we got so many Greeks from all over the world together. But I got a book from Australia, and our event was mentioned in the yearbook of the Greeks of Australia. So this is so fantastic.
That's wonderful. It's amazing how many living poets there are. Yes. And it's good to see this, because the universities spend time studying dead poets like Ferris, and Ritsos and Sigelianos and all these other poets, but it's good to be exposed to the living poets. And you've done a remarkable job in bringing everybody together. That's wonderful. That's commendable. Now, at what point do you think someone should call themselves a writer or a poet? And before I give it to you, George Seferis, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, once said that to be a writer, all you need is 3 people to share your work with. And I'll leave you at that.
Well, writer or poet, the old definition, or I would say the last century's definition of writer or poet, is the one who can actually make a living out of that. Having said that, I have myself experienced lately that this is not really the case, because and maybe it's because of social media, or maybe it's because the world is moving closer together. It's just you don't have to earn your living with that, and at some points you can't even earn your living with that. If I take like the Greek situation with publishing at the moment, if you want to publish a poetry selection, you have to pay 3,000 euros at a decent publishing house. So this is the kind of money that you have to set aside after you've done everything else. Yeah. And lots of poets don't have this kind of money lying around. If you want to do something nice with a little bit of embellishment and like ears on the cover, like for instance, this, yeah. So this is already 3,000 euros. And on top of that, you've been taxed as a poet or as a publisher of a book. You're being taxed by the first euro you're making. So there is no margin for you to earn your living with that. So most of the time people do it as a hobby, but not as a business. You can't do it as a business. So you definitions have to be changed, I think. And also taking into account that lots of people now through Facebook, and this is what happened to me as well. I got all these contacts through the social media, and I took part in a how do you call it, a poetry chain, like they do, you know, like please give us some more poets and take part and stuff like that. I took part in Peat Me Not, and this Peat Me Not was an international poetry chain, and through that, lots of people got in touch with me, and I got more and more and more people reading my poetry, which was unusual for me because up to the lockdown, nobody was reading poetry. So there is a trend now also, yeah, which we need to recognize, that the poets want to get in touch with other poets, which wasn't the case, because writing poetry is a work of solitude and a work of concentration and a work of silence. It's not a work of cooperation. But here we are. There's many groups now, and I can name a few which are getting regularly together. And one of them is Curly and Kuru, which is in Wales. Another one is Poets Without Borders. And there's lots of international poetry groups on Facebook. You just type it in and then you get a long list coming down. So people want to get in touch. They want to read each other's poetry. They want to congratulate each other. There are so many awards suddenly, which weren't there 5 years ago. They were just not there. I was on Facebook 5 years ago, and these things were not there. So this trend is actually, I think, helping a lot to make poetry more accessible to a wider audience. If it's good poetry, I don't know, because with poetry you always have to wait for a while until you're there. And but I think the awards and all these things that they're doing helps a lot. Yeah, I think I moved on to another question of you answering another question, but yeah, that's a different kind of thing. But yeah, I think you can't, definitions have to be changed, and things just change, and trends change, and it's good that it changes, because we have a lot more exchange, we have a lot more information, and we overcame like Corona with that, because before Corona, I was doing a lot of local events here. I was doing every second week events here. And at some point, I was cooperating with a local bar. And at some point, the local bar said, you know, it doesn't work out for us anymore. And thank you very much. And they tried doing it on their own, failing miserably, but never mind. And I got to cooperate with the city, with the cultural department of the city, which was sponsoring partly, for instance, the posters, what you do, and the information to the local newspapers and things like that. But I had still to do the whole event, yes. And I got to do a really huge event in the ancient theater of Nausa, which I had to apply like a half a year before to the architectural, to the archaeological prefectural office in Varia, and they don't answer for a long time, and you're there thinking, is this event gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? Am I gonna invite huge amounts of people? Are they gonna come? Are they gonna give it to us on that day? Is it gonna rain on that day? Is it gonna be clear? Is it, you know, you're going through all that. And then just 2 weeks before the event, they say, yay, you have the permission. So you don't know if you're going to get the permission or not. And yeah, but we still did it. So because I had unofficially informed all the people that we're going to do this event, but we're going to get the permission like maybe even 5 days in advance, but you all have to know that we're doing it. And on the day we did it, there's another funny story. It rained like cats and dogs. It rained cats and dogs. The poets had arrived. We had like 20 poets from all over North Greece. Poets had arrived. We had a lovely morning in the archaeological graves, which are the biggest tombs found all over Greece. We have like 4 really huge tombs here. And then we went and saw the ancient theater. We went to the Aristotle school, and then we went for lunch. So I had the whole day planned. And then in the afternoon, it started raining cats and dogs. So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And the people said, we're here. We're doing it. If it drizzles, it drizzles, which is crazy. And by the time it was time to do the event, it stopped raining in the theater. And we did the event, and we had like a violoncello, which was accompanying some of the poems. And as soon as the violoncello started playing, there were some nightingales which were joining in. It was pure magic, pure magic. So sometimes you have to take risks.
Thank you, Xanthi. I really like that image of the birds and the violoncello. Whenever I open my window and if there's music playing, I can hear the birds outside and they're chirping along. So they have very good ears. You answered a couple of my questions in this process, so I'm not going to ask them.
Okay.
So we can move on. But this is okay. This is wonderful. I love it. Do you think one art can inspire another, like music and poetry?
Yes, definitely, because music and poetry are brothers. So one is hugging the other, and poetry inspired so many people to actually write wonderful music. Like, for instance, Actioniste. This is the first book I read in German, the first huge poem. And I think if it weren't for the music, which Mikis Theodorakis, for instance, wrote for this magnificent piece of poetry, then it wouldn't have the fame that it has worldwide now. Because how many works of Nobel Prize winners do we actually remember? But we remember this because it had such a huge connection with the music, and it got carried everywhere into the world. And then this is one of the biggest examples. But we also have like people who write music all their lives, and suddenly they start writing poetry, because instead of waiting for other people for them to write the poetry to their music, they write their own words and rhythms and accompany it. And I also got to experience that, for instance, translation. If you have like 3 languages like I'm doing, which is a little bit also my work process. Yeah, I write it in one language. It doesn't matter which one. It might be English, and then I try to translate it into German. So I translate it into German, and I hope it works. But sometimes it doesn't really work. So I go back then to the English and change the English a little bit so that it works for German. And then I go back to Greek and translate it into Greek. And this way you have this 3 languages, which is also a really cute game, I'd say, where you play with the meanings of the words, because sometimes the words are similar. Yeah, like for instance, the word nostalgia. You have nostalgia, you have nostalgie, and you have nostalgia. So, but it's not exactly the same thing in all of the 3 languages, and it's interesting how it works. And sometimes it's also interesting to break the patterns, yeah, because there's do's and don'ts in every language. And for instance, somebody said in the workshop I was attending, somebody said, you can't write a poem about patriotism anymore. And that was in the 90s. Yeah, so you can't write that. I said, why? Don't you feel at home? Don't you feel at home? Don't you have a home? I have a home and I miss my home. Are you at home here? And then of course I went home and wrote a poem about home. And if you want, I will read that in the end. And this poem got translated into lately into Spanish and Italian, and I did Greek, English, and German. So it was at first written in German, and when I presented it, the secretary of the House of Writers said, "Give me that poem, I will publish that." I said, really this poem? Because it breaks all rules. Yeah, it has double points, it has like columns, and it's still a completely different poem. And this poem then inspired a whole discussion about post-Nazi Germany, brackets, to feel at home, to be okay with loving their own country, to be okay with loving the landscape, to be okay with whatever they're producing and wherever they're living, and to have friends and to like where they're living. And it was such an amazing process to actually watch where this process ended up, because it said in the end that it contributed to the discussion that everyone is nearly everywhere else in the world a foreigner. You are at home in one country, but everywhere else in the world you're a foreigner. So you need to accept diversity, basically. And this is where it started, with a single poem which just danced out of the row and did a different pirouette and talked about homeland and loving the homeland or missing the homeland. And yeah.
You brought up several topics, and one of them was translating. And you mentioned also about elitis and accionisti and the music. And I think you have a very good point there. The other thing with elitis is that there were some translators in America, Keeley and Sherrard, who translated Seferis and elitis into the English language. And I think that also opened up a lot of doors and made the poems accessible to a lot of more people in the world. So I think translation has a very important role in bridging the countries together, right? And you're doing a remarkable job. The other thing with translation that you sort of implied is that there's a cultural, when you translate a poem, it's not just words. You also have to think about the culture behind it. It helps to have lived in that culture. So I think you have some very good and strong, the German and the Greek cultural advantage to a lot of people who are translating out of context. So bravo, I'm really impressed. Thank you. What is the most challenging part of your writing process, and when do you think a poem is finished?
Yeah. So that question is really, really difficult to answer. So I had to think a long time about that. But what I can share is like a process. So I used to write very short poems, and I like cutting out all the adjectives, all the redundancies. So lately I have found out, or I'm looking at my poems and I'm thinking, oh, that's not short. Oh, that's longer than 24 or 22 lines. What have I done here? So style is actually evolving. Yeah. So you don't really know when the poem is finished. And sometimes I also rewrite poems now. For instance, the poem Shopping List is actually coming from the time where there was the war in the former Yugoslavian Republic. So I was observing the refugees in my class, if I wanted to or not. Yeah. So some of them said, I want to go and talk to my husband in the morning. And can you please not write that I wasn't here? Just sign me in if possible. And then, I'm not going to do that. So I said, yeah, but why? And she said, oh, I want to tell him what to send me. And I need this and I need that. It was stupid things, yeah, what we want, but for them it was the sense of home. So I experimented a long time with that poem, and I wrote it longer and I wrote it shorter, and at some point I included the war zone, and then I found out that I don't actually need that, because when you write the phrase, when you come, bring me, it carries so much of absence and so much of longing of what you want that you don't need to describe. So I'm cutting out whatever I don't need to describe. And I think I still, if I'm not sure now anymore, but if you read the poem about Mediterranean waves, it doesn't have many adjectives. I don't like adjectives. So sometimes when it has adjectives, I go in and cut them out. No, if you don't belong here, get out. So and I also experiment. I have contributed this poem several times in different media to see how the response to that is. How do people react to that? What sort of message do I get? And this is where the online events are really, really helpful, because you get some sort of response, and the response you're getting is to the important things. And this is what I keep then, and the rest I try to avoid because it's not essential to the poem. Yeah, and I also read to friends sometimes. Yeah, so to people who are also poets and who I trust, so that they are not going to steal, and I'm not going to hear it in a different way, like on the next day or in the next event. So I read to them, and they sometimes say, "Yeah, this is good. This is bad. Do this way, or this is strong. Keep that." And yeah, this is why here we are. This is why it's very important to have workshops of poetry, like the thing you're doing, with criticism and really nice respect to the other people who are writing, because this is what's bringing you forward. Because when you realize that on the same theme, people can write in a different way, and you have nothing to be afraid of to share your poem, because the other person is going to do a completely different thing than you're going to do, then you actually are open, and you take it as experimental, and is really, really wonderful. And I got to experience that with a House of Writers in Stuttgart, and I get to experience that with you. And this is why I'm so grateful that you've taken me on. Thank you. And another poem, another example is the poem I wrote about Dimitris Parolas, our conductor and maestro of the choir in Nausa. The first one was a bass poem, and I used the musical interpretations to write "I like you" or "I love you," or it got published in the Poet and in the Anthology of Friendship. And then Robin Barat posted it again on Facebook, so it's out there, and many people saw it. And a few weeks ago, after I was on China's best poet, best international poet list somehow. Don't know why. The friends from the choir said, "Oh yeah, congratulations and stuff. And you have to read a poem now to us." And I said, "Oh yeah, great. So I'm going to read a poem about our maestro." And he was, "Oh no," trying to hide away. I said, "Well, you can hide, but the poem is out there. So I will read it." And I read the poem, and they didn't really understand it. And then he went onto the piano and did the inversions. What means inversion? So just by doing that, so here we have again the inspiration now from one music to the other. I came home in the evening, and just by listening to the inversions he did, I wrote the 3-4 inversions, which I read to you then on the next Saturday. So the poem which I published was unfinished. And I think this is also the beauty of poetry. It never stops to inspire you. And like it comes back like preludiums of Johann Sebastian Bach, where you have the same inspiration coming back in a different variation, in a different inversion, in a different aversion, in a different sequency. And yes, it's infinite. It's infinite. Yes. So it's never finished. The poem never finishes. And if we don't finish it, somebody else is going to finish it for us.
Okay, this is fantastic. I like the way you explained everything with the music and the poetry, and I think we're going to end this with one last question, and then you can read a poem or two before we open it up to the question and answer period. What advice would you give to a poet working on their first poem? And this also, here's another question tied to this. What do you think of the traditional poetry that rhymes versus prose poetry?
I'm not good giving advice. So I know that there are currently several courses, for instance, which you can go to get taught how to write. So what they actually do is just listing up methods to apply on people who were in the past successful with other poems, basically. Okay, so all that does is just copying. It's not a bad idea to copy, but it still needs to be original. Yes, and you need yourself to know what you want to say and then apply your words to the thing you copy. And in the end, I'm going to read a poem which I copied as an homage to the person where I took it from. So when I started writing, I wanted, after the first year, I wanted to burn my poems or to chuck them away. And I said, this is garbage. So I was 16, 17. And my friend Jota Tsendidu, which was my partner, Tofraniomu, as the Greeks say, she took them away from me and she hasn't given them back ever since. So this was a rule which in the previous century people did because they were copying so much from other people, so that they would like make a clean slate after a year where you write continuously something in copy from other people. It means that it's actually not you because it's fresh and so on and so on. So they would burn the first year's work to have a clean slate to continue writing something completely original. So I don't know if it's a good idea, but I'm quite happy, and I'm actually now really curious to see if she ever gives it back to me, what I had written there because I don't remember a word. I can tell you what helped me actually. So it was the poetry workshop of the Writers' House in Stuttgart, which did a really nice work critic on everyone's poems, and the evenings with interesting new poets which came in to talk about their work and how they wrote it. This is always a little bit inspiring, maybe not even helpful, but just listening to the other people, how they write, what they write, how their style is, how they like I go through 3 languages, and then it goes by itself. Is very it's just interesting. But I also have one experience to share where I actually exploded, writing-wise exploded. So I went to a poetry seminar with a poet which I really admired very much, and he was very successful at the time, and I was so hopeful that I will find the key to my success. And I was like 30 at the time. Yeah, so I went. It was far away out of Stuttgart, and the group of poets stayed there overnight in the hotel, and I couldn't afford the hotel. I could barely make the seminar costs, and I could barely make the petrol costs. So this is what I did. I drove both days back and forth. So the second day, at some point, this very nice person, which I admired, attacked me in the seminar. He went and said, "And what have you written which is memorable and interesting?" I thought, okay, I'm gonna die here. But I pulled it together and said, I don't know. Maybe I wrote something good, maybe I didn't. I don't know. So I went home, and on the way home, I was so upset by the whole situation that I had to pull over at a parking and take any pieces of paper, any sort of scrap paper which I could find, and wrote, I don't know, 10 poems. And one which was a really long one and had alterations and things like that. And then I felt better. And of course, the publishing to that sort of poems is never published in anger. So that was one thing which I didn't expect to happen. And another incident, which wasn't pleasant either, was that in this beautiful workshop, which we had with the 10 poets and a few writers which were coming in at the Writers' House of Stuttgart, suddenly barged in a completely talentless person. And we were all sitting there thinking, God, what is she gonna talk about this time? And you know, snooting away and thinking, oh God, we are so much better than she is. And oh no, what is that crap again? Yes, yeah, so all the judgmental, all the everything. So she came in, and oh God. And whilst that was happening, during the session, when we were driving home in the cars or in the tram, we were getting out our pieces of paper and taking that stupid story which she was telling as inspiration to write our own take on that, which was of course nothing like hers. And of course it was always better because she wasn't talented. Yeah, but as we were contemplating to let her go and to kick her out of our fine group, we thought, no, she's bringing in good themes. So no, just keep her on, because she is, in her own bad way, She's a great inspiration. So I think the moral from that story is expect the unexpected. Inspiration strikes when you are least expected sometimes, or from the worst thing you could ever read, which is weird, but it happens because you can put your twist on that. So as the Greeks say, you can learn from the smallest thing, you can learn the greatest stuff. And it was just crazy. So we kept her on for a long while because she was great inspiration. So, and also writing exercises, or write on a daily basis. If it's a letter to a friend, if it's a little, I don't know, rhyme to a person, if it's a greeting card, if it's a Facebook post, if it's an article, a news article, whatever it is, keep writing, because it exercises the writing muscle in order to be able to say things your way. So this is, and I think I needed to say those examples, because sometimes we're so snooty and we think, yeah, I'm so great. And then it always can happen that a poem doesn't cut it, and it's not super duper, and it's not number one. But that's not important. Important is that we try to get better on a daily basis, and we don't have to be super duper, as long as we have something to say which comes out of the depth of our soul. And it's the way we have experienced that.
Thank you. That was good advice. Very good advice. And I can relate to a lot of what you said, and especially the judgmental part. And sometimes, and I don't do this on purpose, I might be like that woman that you talked about who wasn't that good. And everybody's like, oh no, not her again. I might be like her because I don't always write the best that I could. And I don't know if this is subconscious, but I found that when you read somebody who isn't that good, you want to be better. You want to do better than them. But if you read somebody who is really good, you're like, oh, I'm not that good. I'll never reach that height. So there's a little bit of psychology in what you were saying, and I appreciated that because I can relate to it in my own part of our group, and we try to keep it a safe environment. You mentioned something earlier. It's very important, and it's also very important for the creativity to be nurtured, that there is no judgment, because judgment can just kill creativity right away. And although competitions are wonderful and they give prestige to a poet, it's very subjective. So to me, as long as, everybody determines what is successful, right? You're successful if you write so many poems, or you've published, or you've gotten a Nobel Prize. Another person will be successful just getting their thoughts on paper, and that's enough for them, or sharing it with friends. So everybody's different in how they feel about success. Well, given that, and I think we've reached the end, you've answered quite a few of other questions I'm going to ask you. So we're done. You did a very thorough job, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. Could you share some of your poems with us today?
Yes, I have prepared a few. I don't know how long you can bear with me. So I'm going to read the poem which I copied first, which is to Jack Hershman. He is an American poet who just passed away a few months ago. But when I never met him before, I never read his poetry before, and then Antje said, we're doing something about Jack Hershman. I said, who's that? So she sent me something, and then I looked him up, and then I read a few poems, and I was, this is so great what he's writing. So I wrote this homage, copying one of his poems, but in my own way. So this is a sports poem he wrote about, and I made a running game out of it. The running game. The mobility head of elegance, speed, of success, victories, was lost. The mobility I lost held back what was most loved as a kid, the overtaking of the others, the cooperation with the wind on the long stretch of the finishing line, the line of winners. Life's delusion to teenagers, to put it eloquently, that it will give them always a home run. So second, I'm gonna read the poem Homeland in Installments, and this is the poem which actually inspired all this talk about feeling at home and acceptance of others that were mostly not at home. If we just travel to the next city, we're not at home anymore. And if you want, I can read the German version as well. Heimat auf Raten, das Angebot des Lebens, jährliche Tilgungsraten, Laufzeit lebenslänglich, der Preis die unbezahlbare Sehnsucht. Homeland in installments, the offer of a lifetime, annual repayment installments, duration for life, the price, the immeasurable longing. So the next one is going to be printed in an Italian anthology, which is coming out soon. And it was one of the poems which was a parallel work, talking again about inspiration, which we did here in Nausea with the workshop of art, where we did engravings or paintings with parallel works. And this one has I have a little book which I tried to publish. It's not very well. This is the parallel work to that. This is a European Avenue in Frankfurt. It's probably not very good, not very, a little bit too small. European Avenue. European Avenue, avenue of wealth, avenue of speed. European Avenue, avenue of inscriptions, out with the rich, yuppies raus. European Avenue, street of loneliness, number of fortune, parallel to poverty, perpendicular to the railway, collateral of the banks, takeoff or landing runway of foreign expectations and dreams. Now, this is dedicated to the lockdown, and it also exists in several languages because people kept translating it. To the capitals of lockdown. Our days didn't brighten up. Even if the roads are all open, there is nowhere to go. Here in this lane, we will survive the winter until our values will shine like functions with mathematical precision. And I can read it in Greek as well, so that we hear a little bit of Greek. Στις πρωτεύουσες του εγκλισμού δεν άσπρισαν οι μέρες μας, και αν είναι ανοιχτοί όλοι οι δρόμοι, δεν έχουμε να πάμε πουθενά. Εδώ Σε τούτη την ευθεία θα ξεχειμονιάσουμε, ώσπου να φανούν οι αξίες μας σαν εξισώσεις με μαθηματική ακρίβεια. I will read the poem which I have dedicated to the anthology, and it starts with Beyond the Language, and it's called Poetic Habitat. The poets live in their poems. They are born in them. They grow up there. They are raised by the words. In the spaces they breathe. In the punctuation they rest. And even if they leave, they exist in the white of every piece of paper, at the edge of every pencil, and in the infinite options of every language of the world. I think that's a good poem to finish with. Thank you.
That could be one of my favorite. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Xanthi. This was very informative and also delightful, very enjoyable. Have you thought of writing fiction? You're a good storyteller. So expand your poems into writing. I think you could do it very easily. Okay, so
it started a little bit with your workshops, where I've started writing every time a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And
thank you.
You're very good inspiration. Thank you.
You are too. We all learn from each other. We all inspire each other. I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. If you are interested in asking a question, let me put you in gallery view so I can look at you. Andy.
Xanthi, thank you so much for a beautiful presentation. I don't have a question. I just want to tell you how I enjoyed everything that you said, and what really strikes home and makes everything so much more special is your humility and humbleness and simplicity. And it's your words that carry you straight to our hearts, at least to mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Calliope.
Hey, congratulations, Xanthi. You're an amazing woman, an amazing poet. I love your poems. And I have two questions. Since you're a full-time poet and you write in so many languages and international, you're known internationally, I would like to ask you, what is the purpose of poetry?
Poetry for me was at the beginning to write my deepest feelings, which I couldn't tell anybody else. And in that sense, lots of people which I have presented here in Greece said that poetry is hot. Yeah, you can't really touch it, and it's really, you know, if you say you write poetry, you are exposed to the elements, and that's true, because it writes your deepest feelings and you share your most inner thoughts. And every time I give a poem out, or I read a poem, it is my deepest pain and my most vulnerable self, which I'm putting out there. But in doing that, you connect on such a deep level with people, which is amazing, I found, because every time I was scared to say whatever or write and publish, I felt more and more vulnerable, like you're leaving your child out in the rain. So I don't really know what the purpose of poetry is, but I think it's the highest form of expression for me.
Is it an art to please ourselves, or to stimulate and give them messages and inspire them.
It's definitely a message, because when I write about a lot about immigration. There is a whole book. This European Avenue is the whole book is about the experiences in Frankfurt which we had, and how it's like a diary basically of our journey back and forth from Frankfurt to Greece and back, and experiences which we had there. And I thought at some point nobody wants to read that because it's painful. It's really painful at some point. And a friend of mine came here to Greece, and she said, "Oh, you know, I like this poet from Nausea who is so great and stuff." And I said, "Really? That guy?" And then I said, "You know, I'm writing poetry as well. I don't say to minimize him, but here's my book." Gave her that, and she said, "Oh, I'm traveling today, so I'm gonna be reading that on the flight." And she read it on the flight, and when she arrived, she called me back and she said, this is so much of me in that book that I can't believe that I was crying whilst I was reading that." I said, "Why were you crying? This is my experience. Why were you crying?" Because this is my soul. Because she said, "You know, you have so much of this moving back and forth, which I have done, not just between Greece and Germany, but also in Greece with her husband, with divorces, with children taking from here to there, with leaving Christmas trees undone, and things like that, that it touched her so much that it actually alleviated her pain. It took it away, because she knew that somebody else felt that way, and in that way she was so connected to that you have this instant bond that you feel that you are loved through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it made sense for me to start putting this, trying to get this published at some point. But maybe I've written this book 2012 when we came back in September of 2012, and I've done all the work, the paintings myself. These are engravings which I've done all myself. But there's sometimes so much pain in it that you can't let it go. But I think, like, putting this book into publishing, or even, you know, through a copy, this is done on a copy machine with very little effort, gets rid of your pain as well. And seeing that you can help other people alleviate their pain and connect with your thoughts is starting a healing process. And this is, you know, some writers say, if I touch just one person with what I write, it makes me happy. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much. Thank you for your inspiration.
Thank you. And I think we will conclude today's program because we ran out of time. Thank you, Xanthi. Thank you, everybody, for attending this wonderful presentation. This concludes our program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.